the infrastructure, right?
Infrastructure fund, yeah.
Yeah, that's my motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded by the Artie Baker and Chris Sumter team that we give the county administrator the authority to negotiate for the property. Any further discussion?
Or is the amount will be negotiated?
Yes.
And so is there a range that, since we're directing the county administrator to negotiate, is there like a range of possibilities that he should be seeking?
Can y'all hear Ms. McGaney?
Yeah, Ms. McGaney, what we would do is before we obviously come to a final agreement, we would come back to council with the negotiated price. But my guess is it's probably going to be somewhere around, the low end would be 10,000 an acre, and hopefully the high end would be around 15,000 an acre, but we won't know until we start negotiating.
Okay, for those who did not hear him, the answer he said is that he, when he's done with negotiating, that he will come back to council, and he's thinking that the possible range would be like 10 to 15,000 per acre. So that's a part of the motion. That's just a clarification.
That's just a clarification. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand. All
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Okay, it passes.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, Jay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan, next item.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is just a little discussion about the Sunday sales of alcohol. What you have before you on your main agenda is first reading of an ordinance that would call for a referendum. And the referendum question would be, shall the Department of Revenue be authorized 24 hours to allow the sale of beer and wine in permitted off-premise locations without regard to the days or hours of sales? Now that question may seem a little weird, but that's just how it's written in the statute. And I asked the people of the DOR and the Alcoholic Beverage License Division if that's right. They say, yeah, that's right. That's how you word the referendum. And I said, well, if that happens, what does that mean? And the answer to that question is that means that grocery stores and convenience stores may apply for a permit to sell beer and wine on Sunday. So it'd be off-premises sales, grocery stores and convenience stores on Sunday. So those businesses that have a 6-day license, which they have now, would be allowed to purchase a 7-day license. And the fees are more and so forth. But that's really what it boils down to. So even though the wording of the referendum appears to say, like, only 24 hours at a time, that's just how it shows up in the statute. But if it passes that statute, then DOR and ABL can issue the 7-day license. I'll be glad to answer any questions about that at this time.
Any questions of Mr. Bryan?
Jonathan, when would the referendum take place?
It'd be on November the 2nd or whatever. Yeah, it'd be
Okay.
this November.
First. Okay.
It'll be in the November election on the ballot.
November the 3rd.
Right.
November the 3rd is the general election.
Okay. This is just for presentation purposes only. We'll call for a motion and second for the vote in the regular meeting of our council. Correct, Mr. Bryan?
Yes, I'll make essentially the same presentation during the regular meeting.
Okay.
Okay, very well. Did we say anything about the wording that will be on the referendum? Will we be voting for that at this time, during the general meeting, or will that wording be determined at a later date?
Did you hear that, Mr. Bryan?
No, sir, I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
Well, the wording, maybe I need to come closer. I don't know whether, it's picking up my. Yes, my question is, I know that we're on the agenda to vote whether or not this item will be, will we allow this item to be placed on a referendum during the November election. My question is, will we also be voting on the wording of how is it going to be placed on the referendum?
No, the wording is set by statute. So I've copied the wording straight out of the statute, and even though it seems a little stilted, that's how it needs to be worded in order for grocery stores and convenience stores to be able to apply for the 7-day license.
Okay, thank you. I'm clear.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a budget presentation by Third Judicial Circuit Solicitor, Mr. Ernest A. Finney.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Administrative Council person. I'm very glad we have the opportunity to present a budget proposal for the new fiscal year. And I want to let you know that I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today. You all have received a letter from me with several attachments which tend to support the information that I have put in the letter. I am requesting that the budget be increased by $338,000 so that we may add 2 attorney positions, victim advocate, and investigative positions to our staff that's currently big. The reasons for that have been detailed in the letter. This is not the first time that I've been before council to ask for increases because I have consistently maintained that we were understaffed, not doing the job we could be doing, in addition to that, because we did not have personnel. As I said forth in the letter that was been handed out, I did an audit this year and found out as compared to other circuits in South Carolina, the shortage that I had was not with the attorneys, it was with the support staff. One of the documents we have attached to your briefing, the briefing shows that of the 4 circuits that I am comparing myself to in terms of size of cases, we rank last in terms of average number of staff we need to operate. I had a situation for the past 10 years that we have been operating with 1 investigator, and that investigator basically worked in Sumter. I have no investigators in the other counties. I know that's not your problem. But 1 investigator in Sumter has come to be a problem because when we try cases, we are trying cases in front of 2 different judges, and we need investigators to help the attorneys try the cases. What has been done for many years is that 1 investigator, the only one we have, has been assigned to the most serious case. But if we happen to be trying 2 murder cases at the same time, which does happen, there is no investigator to help the other lawyer that does not have an investigator. It is way past time for us to have that kind of help so that we can get witnesses contacted, we can serve subpoenas, we can do investigation to make sure that our law enforcement personnel have everything we need to go forward and present the case. As you can see, the First Circuit, which is Aiken County, has 4 investigators. The Second Circuit has 3 counties, they have 6 investigators. The Third Circuit, that's us, and then the 12th Circuit, that would be Florida, they have 3 investigators. All these circuits were picked based on their size, generally the same as the Third Circuit, which is Sumter and the surrounding counties. You also will see that we have a need for victim advocates. We now have one victim advocate in each county. Sumter is twice as large, and we have twice as many cases as the other counties. We have needed for quite some time another victim advocate. I'm asking for 2 victim advocates to be added to the staff so that we can keep in touch with the victim. Sometimes because cases take a long time to come to court, we have a duty and a need to keep up with our victims who they move, they get transferred to other jobs. We have to have people who do that. And it is a requirement that is going to be very important for us to be able to keep up with the cases, especially now that we're in a position having been delayed for several months because of the virus. We have had real court since January. And when we start that, whenever we start that, we're going to need all hands on deck because we're going to need so people working with such bad. So the investigative position, the 2 attorneys, the 2 attorneys have been requested because I have so many cases coming into the system. Before January, I was doing all right with attorneys as compared to the other counties. In January, I lost 2 of my veteran attorneys because they went and got other jobs, basically because they could make more money. Get paid more money. One became a judge, and one became the new circuit defendant. And I was happy for them because they were very, very experienced. I've got to replace those lawyers now. But in the meantime, I have a serious case management situation where no one should be made to carry more than 300 to 350 cases. And the only way that I can get to the point where I've got enough lawyers to handle just that many, not anymore, 300, 350 cases, is by increasing my staff. We started off the year, last year with 9 lawyers, including myself, that would be 10. We now have, because of 3 vacancies, 3 departments, we now have down to 7. And one of those lawyers is part-time. I want to make this clear to council. The reason I'm asking for this money also has to do with the fact that last summer in June, the IRS changed their regulations, did not allow me to carry part-time lawyers or what we call contract lawyers. Contract lawyers were lawyers I was paying through the county, straight money, because I didn't have to pay the benefits, didn't have to pay the retirement, no health insurance. That was a savings to me and to the county. IRS changed that regulation. I was looking at our human resource department, but now I have to pay those lawyers, retirement, health plan, whatever other benefits they get entitled to. That costs me a lot of money in the budget. And because of that, I'm not able to spread out the work among more people. Because now everybody I hire basically has to be in the benefit tax. That's why I need the additional monies. As I have asked for in the past, and I'm asking for again, I'm also asking for about $50,000 to pay salary increases for people who have not been given good salary increases over the last 5 years. These are professional people who are hired at a very low level. One of the detailed things I mentioned to you that showed you in here is an ad for Horry County. They are starting an attorney to start out at something like $65,957. My starting attorney started out at $40,000. And once they get on, if I can keep them, they don't get raises very often, except for the 1 or 2% that the county generally gives every year or so, every other year. There are people who work with me more than 5 years that have not had a significant raise. And I need to change that so that I can keep them and reward them for the work they're doing. Finally, if you don't mind, this week I found some revenue streams for every county in South Carolina that operates as solicitor's office. And I have handed out this information to you all so that you can look at it. I was shocked to learn that taking away places like Greenville and Charleston and Beaufort, we are severely underfunded here in the Third Circuit. Sumter County has a budget of $483,479. It has remained at that level for the past 10 years. Not changed. Aiken County, which has a little bit more population, pays their solicitor $1,793,000. Florence County pays their solicitor $1,228,000. They have 20,000, 25,000 more population in Sumter County. Higgins County, about 20,000 more than Sumter County, pays their solicitor $752,000 or $753,000. All of the numbers are on there. The bottom line is this: out of the 7 counties that I think have a similar population to Sumter, there is a per capita funding figure. That per capita funding figure for most of the counties is somewhere around 7 to 8%. 8% is the state average. I would ask the Sumter County fund the solicitor's office in this county at the state average of 8%. Correct, right now, according to the numbers, we are at 4.5%. That is grossly underfunded compared to other places that have the same population. And it is something that needs to change because it hasn't changed in almost 10 years. I would be glad to answer any questions you may have. I would appreciate some assistance from council. I know that it is in the middle of a pandemic and we don't know which way we're going, but I can't get ready to open the door to be ready for the new year, whenever it gets here, without replacing some of the lawyers out of law, putting in some new lawyers, and having training them now is a great time to add lawyers training because we're not operating for it. So that when the doors open, we will be ready to go and we can take care of the case. I will say this: there is in the letter some information about the crimes that we are dealing with. Sumter County has not had a death penalty case since I've been here 10 years, but this year we may have one. Obviously, we had a situation this year where the mother and the daughter were killed by the man. That case is a death penalty case in terms of it qualifies. There's got to be some room in this budget for us to do that kind of case if it comes across. The other thing I want to mention is that there are more murders occurring in Sumter County now than have over the last 2 years. I believe the number is 2018 was 7, in 2019 it went up to 15, it's in all that, I have the detail there. We had 13, and we had 7 in 2018, we had 15 in 2019. And this year, from January to present day, we had 13. And we got 6 more months to go before the year is out. All of those cases, which are being investigated and made by police, coming our way, I've got to be ready to go with it. And those are going to take the additional staff that we're talking about and asking for today. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer.
Any questions of our solicitor? No questions at all, no comments?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Mixon?
Just for a point of clarification, and I'm trying to look through the information, and I apologize. Most of the presentation had a little echo to it, but I think I understood most of it. Is the request for an additional 388,000 or the 450?
The 450 was it was a typographical error.
Okay.
That was on a different chart. It should have been 388 is the requested number because that's what the calculation showed we needed to add the staff and get the budget for the salary increases for some of the members that haven't had a raise.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. Just wanted to confirm that.
So I'm looking at your letter, Mr. Solicitor. It says 388 plus 50,000 in salary increases. Is that correct?
No, sir. If you look at the first, chart, it's really 337 for the 4 positions. And I added 50 to that. That's where I got the 388.
Okay.
But Mr. Chair, just for council's information, the 388 would be equivalent to 1.4 mills. I believe, is that correct, Kelson? That's it. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Gary, could you say that again, please?
The 388,000 would be equivalent to 1.4 mills, tax mill increase. Just for information only, sir.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Yes, well, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Solicitor, for presenting us that information, because we do have to make informed decisions, and it's really kind of sad to know that beginning an attorney would be making just $40,000 a year with all the investment that he or she has given in education and professional preparation. I just can't even imagine that. And I did want to ask, though, since it's a circuit, have you made an appeal to any of the other counties within the circuit?
It's just every county I'm meeting with, just like you need today. I will tell you that 2 of my counties, Williamsburg and Lee, are very, very strapped for resources. And of course, they don't have the caseload that we have here in Sumter. One of the main things that drives my request is we have so many cases coming in. We have so much court to get ready for, and it requires a bigger team than I've got right now.
Okay, I'm sure you heard the county administrator mention that the 388,000 that you're requesting would require a 1.4 mil. Now, I know that we're going to have some additional discussion as far as the budget is concerned, but hearing that, if we are, in our deliberations and everything, if we're not able to find, the revenue within our capabilities without a mill increase, I would just like to ask, is this final, or is there another, maybe another common ground that you might be able to tighten things up just a little? I know that in this economy, having a mill increase is one of the last things that we like to do.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
It's been 10 years. No
Yeah.
new money, 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to let that sit there for a minute.
Yeah.
The second thing is, you are absolutely right. I have a lawyer that's been with me 5 years, and he came into my office and broke into tears because he was not able to pay household bills because he's paying student loans first to try to maintain that. And I haven't been able to give him a raise in the time he's been with me. And he's a good lawyer. I want to keep him. I've lost 2 very good lawyers to the Attorney General's office in Columbia because they pay more money. And those guys want to go find that. And I don't mind that. But obviously, we got to have good talent here. We want to be able to have good lawyers going to court to not only to try the cases, but also to move cases quicker, because it saves all of us on the jail, it saves all of us on the juries. It works to the benefit of the community. You got a good staff. And I'm not asking for a Cadillac. If you look at these numbers from Lancaster pays more than we do, Aiken, Florence, Orangeburg, everybody is getting a better share of the pie. When the officers, police officers come in here and ask for raises, they deserve it because they don't stop working at 5 o'clock. They have to work until they solve the case. But that case has to then come to us, and we have to get it back. And with more cases coming in, more serious cases coming in, we need the help. We've been patient. We have been patient.
And I'm glad that you contacted us too. You deserve an audience, and I regret that you were not before us earlier in this process. And I'm hoping that once we get back to the table and are able to shuffle our numbers around, that we're able to help you. I regret it's been 10 years. I do.
And my mother and father told me to always say thank you for, even if I get a half a cup, but I want you to understand that you all want the courthouse to be as good on the inside as it is pretty on the outside, and that's what I'm asking for today, is to help to get that done.
Yes. Thank you, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. Mr. Mixon, I turn it back over to you.
Mr. Chair, council members, while Joe is loading up the PowerPoint presentation, I want to take this opportunity to thank council for, as you can see, a very difficult budget process. We've mentioned before that the need is great and we do the best we can with the resources we have. You do have a hard work and dedicated workforce for Sumter County. With that, I'd like to, Joe, if you would, we're going to do a quick recap of where we were for the first two readings. Joe, if you move to the next slide. Go ahead. Next one right there. Let's start with a budget recap. As y'all recall, at first reading, we had an unbalanced budget of just over $161,000. For second reading, we came in with a balanced budget at $51,059,854. I'll quickly go through some of the highlights, but certainly not all the detail, but some of the highlights of what's in that second reading version. Joe, if you go to the next slide. As you can see, we've got the growth revenue on the tax revenue at $428,000. We have another couple of $100,000 for fee and lieu. We discussed redirecting some of our infrastructure fund. That's about 3%, which equals to 216. We have put in there the local government fund at the full amount, 217,000. Voter registration funding, that's additional funding because it's an election year. The DPREP fees, that's the additional fees in the treasurer's office offset with expenses. Then we have additional detention center revenues of 165,000. At that stage, we had a meal increase of 1.5 meals, which was equivalent to the 432,000. We also consider authorizing some of our general fund balance to balance the budget at 275,000. I'd like to remind you that we did change the local option sales tax factor. You can see that there. Fire district millage was increased, and as well as the solid waste tipping fee. Next slide, Joe. That's the revenue components. The major expense related to the budget at that time was a 2% COLA for all employees, 517,000. The wage study adjustments at 522. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. The reassessment cost, it is a reassessment year for Sumter County, and there will be additional costs associated with that. There's the deed prep work of the 100,000 offset with the revenue. Voter registration, again, offset revenues from the state for running the election. There's the property and liability, the large increase that was kind of put on right there at the end, 308,000. Are gonna propose doing a capital bond again at $3.5 million. That's equivalent to our 15 meals that we have allocated for that. And then we also are asking to use some of our fund balance for one-time capital purchases of $250,000.
Okay.
Joe, the next one. So here we are tonight at third reading. There are some minor adjustments to discuss. What we're proposed tonight at third reading, which will be on our regular agenda, is a balanced budget at $51,163,769. Again, revenue and expenditures balanced. Joe, next slide. What we've recommended to change in this one, I made an error last meeting and I apologize for that. I thought that the sheriff was aware of all the conversations in detail of what we were discussing with the wage study, but he was not. So I spent some time with him, he and his staff, right after that meeting, and we discussed a change. And that change, as y'all recall, you agreed to the wage study for the sheriff deputy starting pay at $38,000. That was $1,000 more than what the wage study proposed for those positions, but that was the commitment, I believe, that was made by council and the request that came from the sheriff for those deputies. Also including in that the study was detention officers. The study had them at $31,750. After the conversation and meeting with the sheriff, he would like to request that be moved to $33,000. His concerns, and I think are very legitimate, is that, as y'all know, it's very, very difficult and has been for some time to recruit and retain detention officers. That's probably the hardest employment positions we have in the county. And he thinks that $33,000, although it's not a great deal of increase, it's about $1,200 more for the detention officers. He believes that it would put him in a better position, particularly as it relates to the surrounding county. So his request is to move it from the $31,750 to $33,000. Joe, the next slide. You can see that adjustment there on your screen. The wage study salary adjustment, and mine is blocked on this screen, but it's $626,368 to, sorry, my screen is blocked. An additional $103,915, $103,915 increase. That includes all the other adjustments in that department, along with the benefits as well. Next slide, Joe. You can see this in our revenue. What we propose to do is to change the millage request. And at second reading, it was 1.5 mills. To address this request from the detention center, we would have to increase it by 0.4 mills, which would take it up to 1.9 mills. And that would cover the proposed adjustment for the detention center. So the request tonight would be for all things to remain the same, except for, instead of 1.5 mills, it would be 1.9 mills to accommodate this request.
Mr. Nixon,
Yes, sir.
if I will, Mr. Baton was trying to get my attention, and he was waving his hands, and I did not see him. He wanted to make some comments while the solicitor was here.
Yes,
so
sir.
if you don't mind, I'd like to recognize Mr. Baton.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a talk with the solicitor concerning his personnel and the lack of staff that he had. And I just wanted to make the comment that the solicitor's office plays a key role in our criminal justice system in Sumter County. And if his system is broken and not operating in efficiency as it should be, then it impacts on the whole system. And when you start talking about people in our detention centers, and the reason why they're staying there longer is because we don't have the people to process them. The solicitor's office don't have the staff to process them as fast as they want to. So therefore,
Did your microphone pick his voice up?
I don't know, could y'all hear Mr. Baton through my microphone? His phone microphone was muted.
Yes,
so
sir.
I said all that, no one heard me.
No,
huh?
they said they heard.
We could hear it.
Mine could-
We could hear it.
Okay. And just my point of view is that if the solicitor's office is not able to proficiently and rapidly perform their duties, then it hurts the whole criminal justice system in Sumter County. So we need to look at the fact that if he can't process people as fast as he can out of the detention center, we're going to pay more money keeping them in the detention center. We're going to pay more staff to keep them in the detention center. So we're going to have to look at the fact that the solicitor plays a key role in our whole criminal justice system in Sumter County. And we should look at giving him the personnel that he needs so that he can be proficient in doing his duties. Thank you.
Mr. Mixon, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to conclude, I've gone through just about all the numbers tonight. I know it's, again, a lot of information, but the suggested changes tonight from second reading to third reading is all about adjusting those detention center officers up to the 33,000. And the change in the proposed budget from second reading to third reading is adjusting the meals from the original 1.5 to 1.9 meals, an adjustment of 0.4 meals. This will produce a balanced general fund budget of $51,163,769. Are there any questions in regards to any of that? I believe that kind of wraps.
I have a question, Mr. Mixon.
Yes, sir.
When are we going to consider the request by the solicitor's office? Because I am in agreement with Mr. Bateman.
This can be, you can right now add it or do it in the regular agenda. Right now is the budget workshop, be the time to discuss it.
Okay, this is the time for discussion, y'all.
Yes, sir.
Any comments from anyone?
And I know that council members do not have, we're not privileged to be able to see all the little crevices of our revenues, but we do know that we place a lot of emphasis on economic development, which is really great. And we do allow a lot of fee in lieu of taxes. And that is great as well, because we have done well with economic development. But when it comes to time when we are unable to equitably compensate our workforce, then we need to look at the possibility of allowing some of those fees to go toward more than economic development. And I, for one, do not wish to add any additional millage. You know, we were addressing law enforcement the whole year, and we know that it was imperative for us to do something. But now this has been brought to our attention, and we cannot allow it to fall on deaf ears. So I, for one, would be willing for us to, even if it requires an ordinance, to change the percentage of the fees that go into our infrastructure fund in order to do what we need to do, then I would be willing to do that. But, you know, when we don't have enough revenue like some of the other counties, then we need to utilize and divvy up the revenues that we do have so that we can be fair to our workforce.
Don't everybody speak up at once.
At least the lawyers, you know. We may not be able to give them everything they ask for, but when we hear that an attorney is making $40,000, that is not, I think we're bigger than that. We're better than that.
Mr. Nixon, you mentioned during the solicitor's presentation that the request that he's making equated to, I think, a 1.4 mil increase.
That's correct.
Is there any other way of funding that, as Ms. McGaney asked?
Yeah, $388,000. That's what it equals to. We're just pulling from the infrastructure fund and let's roll.
I know we don't like pulling money out of the infrastructure fund for recurring costs, but we need to do something for the solicitor's office.
And that's why
it's been 10 years.
And that's why I mentioned adjusting the percentage of infrastructure funds that we allow to go into that fund, you know, because we do operate on fees in lieu of taxes. If these industries were paying taxes and not fees, then that would give us more revenue. But because it's fee in lieu of taxes, then that means that those fees go toward economic development. But we have other needs as well.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, you have a number of options at your disposal. Certainly one of those Ms. McGaney speaks of, we've already done. We've adjusted the infrastructure fund from 20% to 17%. You could also increase the infrastructure funding from 20% to a higher number if you wanted to go that route. So we've looked at, discussed that in the past, but elected not to do that. And of course, you always have your fund balance, which you can lean on, but we're already leaning on that kind of heavy this year. But that's certainly another option. Those would be the three areas that I would think would be your option, sir. I was trying to look through my notes and find where we did the revenue sheet, discussed the fee in lieu, that 3%, that 3% adjustment equated to about $200,000.
And what I'm saying is that we may not be able to give him all of what he asked for, you know. We can only accept whatever information he gives us, but if it requires another meeting, a sit-down meeting, you know, and we do need transparency so that we can know exactly, you know, what we are funding and you know, to be able to make an informed decision. But right now, from what I've heard, I just think that we cannot walk away from the table and not do anything. And then we cannot sit at the table and impose another millage. We just can't do that. The economy is not right for that.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Edens?
question for the administrator. So we're taking how much out of infrastructure starting this year? That's, you said 3%, and it was how much?
200,000.
That's just 200 to do 3. So if we increased it, we'd have to go to 25% to do any good. And that still wouldn't be but what, 300 at the most, wouldn't even quite be 300.
Yes, sir. Right around 300. I think Kelsey might be running some numbers, but that's pretty close to figure. Yes, sir.
That would be the only way I could support it.
And I do want to remind council that in doing that, you're actually taking 5% out of the revenue stream from other taxes.
And everybody needs to understand what that means.
That's principally why you've stayed away from it in the past.
And that's why we really should stay away from it now too, really. We're gonna really stir up a hornet's nest.
Well, he's been asking for it for several years, and it's gone 10 years without anything.
Anybody else have any suggestions?
And I wish he'd come to us 2 months ago. I mean, when we were in the beginning stages of all this budget cycle, you know, we had time to maybe look at a few other options, but you know, at this stage, we're balanced and ready to move on. Third reading in what, an hour from now? I don't like that.
Yeah, we gotta look at, he came to us last year.
That's last year's last year. This is this year.
He came to us last year with the same request. I mean,
Mr. Chair, I'm certainly not trying to make any excuses, but as y'all recall, when we started this whole budget process, it was on the onset of the COVID-19. We suggested and informed council then that the whole the budget process itself was going to be somewhat different. The request was sent out to all department heads if they had any additional requests, and at that time we didn't receive anything, and we honestly did not follow back up with the solicitor. Maybe we should have, but again, this has been somewhat of a different task this year, and kind of tried to work within our abilities of restrictions this time.
And I do have another question, Mr. Chairman, and it was kind of hard to understand him, and I didn't have any anything written in front of me, but he says that he had 2 attorneys leave, but he never mentioned anything about, has he rehired those 2? Does he still have that funding in his budget to hire those 2? That would be 2 of the ones he's saying he's short?
He said that he is gonna have to replace them when he gets back,
I can't understand her.
when they come back in January. That's what he said. That person should have been asked why he was here. Can we ask the county administrator just for a minute, at least give me some kind of help? He can find something to help him. It's not gonna hurt nothing if infrastructure to fund for right now. Is my mic?
For time's sake, Mr. Mason, let's just go ahead and move on right now.
Jim's muted.
Everybody is being quiet except for Mr. Edens. I don't know what else to do at this point except just to move on for right now, Mr. Mixon, for the sake of time.
You know, again, one of the things, obviously, if there's a motion and a second, then council can go ahead and rule on it. And then we can at least have something prepared, or at least looking at it for the next meeting, because we do anticipate, we do have the need to have a approved budget tonight.
I got one quick question. Moving the infrastructure to 25, what you're doing is you're actually taking money away from the school district at that point, aren't you? And other, isn't it? I think that would be the first group that's going to come being upset with us doing that. If you move that from 20 to 25, then they're going to start losing their funding that they're getting from the infrastructure. So that would probably not be too good of an idea in my book. Just a comment.
You are correct, Mr. Baker. Mr. Chair, is there a motion from council on this, or just? Muted again. So the chairman's muted. Can you unmute somebody beside Jim and maybe he can speak from there?
Mine is it.
Can you mute Vivian?
Gary, I'm sorry, my laptop just froze.
That's okay. We're fine.
I think you were asking, Mr. Mixon, is there a motion?
Yes, sir. If council's of the mind to make a motion to move this along, do it now or certainly in the regular meeting.
Will somebody say something?
I just soon address it at the regular meeting with the budget, when we have vote on the budget.
Well, can you make that as a motion, Mr. Baker?
Yeah, I make a motion that we will address the budget in our regular meeting. And any other, I guess, revenues that they're asking for.
I don't see where you need a motion, Mr. Chairman. It's already on the agenda.
Okay, well, that would be what I would like to do, is address this, is just vote on it when we get to the meeting and vote on the budget. I mean, it's just hard to start looking at. I don't have enough information. I don't understand a lot of what's going on with his request, and to be honest with you, I'm just not ready to vote on his request right now.
All right, Mr. Mixon, you've heard the pleasure of council. Just move on.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda,
We're just going to address it in the regular agenda.
the next item quickly is, as you know, in the budget process, we have to get council to approve any recommended changes to our county handbook, employee handbook. There's some language, I think you might have that before you, but basically it's language about the substance abuse policy. As y'all know, the environment we live in and work in is changing. We have added language in our policy about CBD and hemp to make sure that the employees are fully aware of the consequences of testing positive for both of those substances. And that's a request that's going to be a part of the budget process for y'all to recommend for approval. That's all I have on that, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question, and you mentioned the CBD. Is that because they have no way of distinguishing the difference between it and marijuana in the test?
That's
Okay.
what I understand, sir.
But I know a lot of people are using it. And,
Yes, sir.
yeah, that's kind of tough.
And it is, and a lot of the conversation basically equated to, again, if you're impaired, just like with alcohol, even though alcohol is legal and certainly able to drink that, but if you get tested positive for alcohol while you're on the job, and there may be consequences associated with that as well. Same thing with this. It's a drug that has the potential to impair someone's ability to work.
CBD does?
Yes, sir.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought it didn't have like THC in it, so it really didn't have any effect with your mind, I guess. What I've always heard.
This is something that's, again, we're not unique in all this. A lot of the different companies and all are going to this policy, and we've run it by actually our HR, and this is where they requested what they requested.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
We adopt the changes.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we adopt the changes to the employee handbook. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, Mr. Mixon, it passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the agenda is a recap of the conversation we had with our school district. I know we have Dr. Martin Knox on the line, as well as Ms. Jennifer Miller from the school district. They're both on this Zoom meeting and certainly would be available if you have any questions. But quickly, what I will do is go through a recap. But before that, I believe there has to be some action by council member. Lost the chairman there. Where did the chairman go? Oh, there. He is.
What kind of action you talking about, Gary?
One of our council members, Mr. Baton, has recused himself from any conversations related to the school district.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I just need to confirm before I move forward. Because I can't tell what's going on there in chambers.
He has left the building.
Okay, thank you. So I can proceed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. As you can see, on our last meeting on June the 9th, Dr. Martin Knox, along with Ms. Miller, actually presented to council their request for assistance this year for the school district. Joe, can you go to the next slide? You can see in their request, it was about related to positions for the school district. They did a very thorough job, I think, of covering those positions and the need. The total was 87.5 positions, a total of $4.6 million in total request. Show the next slide. They have actually broken that into a 3-year phased approach. You can see in fiscal year 2021, the up and coming year, they're requesting 29 of those positions at $1,537,851. So that is the request before council this year, as best we can understand. And we've had conversation with Ms. Miller through Kelsey over the week. So I think we're pretty clear on that portion. The next slide. Won't go into great detail here. Kelsey's certainly available, I believe. This is a lot of information, but what we've tried to do is project the mill growth and also the mill, the amount proposed to be collected. And you can see in that the revenue increase. There's a couple of different ways you can go about this, but they're really looking, what they're looking for from us is what the county provides to them. Revenue. See that number, the total mill value is 288,875 vehicles, which is up by 1,000 from 40,000. And so if you go to the next slide, this is the request before you. Again, year one plan was $1,537,851 for the 29 positions. If you did that request just on mills alone, based on the mill value, that would be 5.3 mil increase. Again, this is an estimate. If you actually account for the 1.5% growth in that, that's about 588,000, and then you would only need 3.3 mil increase. That's what we estimate.
Her speaker's on, that's why it's causing the
district to honor their $1.5 million request. That's the information we have for council tonight. That's what you'll be voting on tonight in the regular meeting. Or if you have any other questions of myself, Kelsey, or even I think again, the school staff that's available tonight.
Gary, I got one quick question. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Artie.
What are the 29 positions that they're talking about this year? Is that the nurses and the custodians?
I think that would be a question best addressed to the superintendent.
Okay, well, are they available here with us?
I believe they are, Joe.
Yes, sir. Good evening. So as it relates to COVID, we divided the positions that we need over a year period. And so it would include your nurses, your psychologists, your building service staff, as well as 2 of the teaching positions. So we've actually divided what the need is over a 3-year period. So yes, sir, to answer your question.
So I guess my question, that the 29 positions you're asking for this year is a mix of nurses, custodial, and teaching positions.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. And to me, I just think that money from the state should cover at least your custodial and your teaching. I mean, your nursing positions. And I mean, because I just feel like that money y'all should be able to use that money for that. That's my personal feeling. I'm probably dead wrong on it, but I just wanted to throw it out there. It was just a comment. Y'all don't need to respond to it.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Mixon, if that's the end of the presentation, I guess that's it.
That's all I have for tonight, sir. We'll address a lot of these issues in the budget discussion on the regular agenda. Thank
All
you.
right. Any other questions? Any other comments? May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded that we adjourn. Any questions? Any discussion? All in favor?
All right.
All opposed? We are adjourned.